On the last day of our North Wash canyoneering trip, we had planned on doing 2 canyons back to back. We were going to start with Slideanide and then go immediately into Arsenic. Both have poison themed names because they are located in the Poison Springs area of North Wash. This canyon has one of the easiest approaches out of any of the ones that we did in North Wash. It's a fairly simple 1¼ mile walk through rolling hills and sandy washes. This canyon is rated 3B, which means it's an intermediate canyon with the chance of encountering water. This canyon has 2 to 3 rappels with a maximum of 80 feet. However, there are some hardcore canyoneers that can downclimb this entire canyon. As we crested the last hill, Slideanide started to creep into our view on the right side. And this canyon starts off in style because that 80-foot rappel that I mentioned earlier is the very first rappel. The conditions seemed like they were almost ideal as we geared up and got ready to drop in. If you are hoping to downclimb this entire canyon, there is supposedly a way to downclimb this one if you wrap around the canyon a little bit further to the east. But we brought more than enough rope, and the first rappel looked pretty fun, so we figured that we would go for it. To get started, you need to climb down onto the ledge. This is where we found a large boulder with webbing tied around it. Everything looked like it was in pretty good condition at the time, but Kelly decided that since it was a larger drop that he would jump in as a backup just in case. This rappel is fairly straightforward with the exception of the fairly large size free hang that's about 5 or 6 feet down from the start. It's nothing overly challenging, but it's nice to know that it's there so you can plan ahead for it. Since you're getting the biggest rappel of the canyon out of the way first, you would think that you're getting done with all of the hard parts. Well, at least in my opinion, the tougher stuff is still to come. But then again, at this point we had only had 12 canyons under our belt. As impressive and slightly intimidating as this rappel looks, it really isn't too challenging, and soon everybody was down at the bottom and we were moving on to the next one. After rappel 1, you're going to be making your way down a series of sandy washes and small down climbs. You are definitely not going to want to wear your favorite clothes in this canyon or any other canyon in North Wash. This was our first visit here and I think we learned that lesson real quick. If I'm not mistaken, I think that V burned through 4 pairs of yoga pants in 3 days. Despite its somewhat creepy name, once you get down into Slideanide, it is actually really quite beautiful. The towering walls and seemingly endless washes seemed to go on forever and it felt like we had the entire place to ourselves. You are going to be continuing about 400 feet down the canyon before you start getting to the bigger down climbs. I'm not going to lie, these ended up being a little bit intimidating for me. I spent about 6 years of my life bouldering, so I think that my brain is wired to look for climbing holds. So when I was standing at the top of some of these larger down climbs, my brain was just constantly scanning and looking for something to grab onto. V was able to grasp the concept much faster and she actually really loved this canyon. The first sizable downclimb that you're going to come to is about 25 feet high and has smooth sloped walls. There was an anchor set up, but the group decided that it would just be easier to downclimb it. A lot of the downclimbs here are going to be super tight. You're going to need to either throw your pack down or zipline it down. The walls in some sections are super smooth, and even though the sandstone gives you a bunch of traction, it is pretty easy to slip at times. Like I said before, some people decide to downclimb this entire canyon. But when we got to this point, we saw that there was webbing already set up and we figured that we would play it on the safe side and just rappel this one. I'm glad that we did because as we made our way down we noticed that it flared out towards the bottom, which would make it really tricky to downclimb. But luckily if you're rappelling it, aside from being a bit of a tight squeeze up at the top, it's nothing too challenging. After everyone finished this rappel, we were just a short walk down the canyon to the next sizable drop. This one is also downclimbable and I've actually seen people do it in videos, but it is a little on the advanced side, so once again we ran a rope and rappelled it. The tricky thing about downclimbing or rappelling this one is that it is 2 boulders that have wedged themselves into a slot with nothing in between. The 2 walls of the slot are also just far enough apart to make it a little bit tricky for smaller canyoneers and people who aren't super flexible. As seemingly awkward as this one was, everyone in our group seemed to be on their A game that day and it didn't seem to give anyone too much trouble. One thing's for sure, after doing this canyon, I have a ton of respect for anyone who does decide to just downclimb here because it can be pretty sketchy at times. Especially when you get to this next downclimb. This one wouldn't have worked very well as a rappel, so we are actually down climbing it. We used the rope to zip line our bags down, and we also had it as a hand line just in case. This was easily the biggest down climb that V and I had ever done, and I would definitely be lying if I said that we weren't a little bit intimidated. On the positive side though, the walls are pretty close, so you can use a ton of pressure to keep yourself from sliding down any faster than you want to. This is just the beginning of a rapid fire series of down climbs. The good thing is that you're probably getting the biggest and trickiest one out of the way first. Some of the other ones have some awkward moments, but I don't think any of them could compare to the big one. With all of the sliding down the canyon walls, the name Slideanide definitely started to make sense. We were here during the drier part of the year, but I believe it is somewhere around this section of the canyon where you could encounter chest-deep waters during the rainy season. It sounds like you're not able to stem over all of the pools, so if you're here during that time, prepare to get wet. After one last down climb, it was time for a nice little breather. You're going to be a short walk down a sandy wash from a really beautiful spot. As we rounded the corner, we were surrounded by tall, striped, wavy walls. We took a quick break here, but it was short-lived and soon we were back to the action. Soon you will be at the grand finale of this canyon, which is probably in my top 3 of all-time rappels that I've done so far. Well, actually, this is 2 rappels. You start off with a short drop down into this cave, which is already pretty unique compared to anything else that we've experienced in our short canyoneering career. After a few of us rappelled down into the cave, it was getting a little bit crowded. There isn't room for a whole lot of people down there. So some of us had to get started on the second half. It starts by working your way down and squeezing under this large boulder. With all the gear that you might have with you, it could be a little bit of a tight fit. After squeezing through the tight gap, the rappel will curve off to the right. If you have planned on down climbing this entire canyon, this part could be extremely challenging. You could probably squeeze yourself way into the crack for most of the way down, but the last 10 or 15 feet is pretty smooth and there's not much to hold on to. After the first group got out of the cave, the second group was able to drop in and join us. Kelly, being the Spider-Man that he is, decided to be last and he was going to down climb it. He made it look a lot easier than I thought it would be, but even he needed just a tiny bit of help to finish that last part. After that, the canyon, with the exception of the hike out, is done. We took a quick second to repair our clothes that got absolutely shredded over the course of Slideanide, and even took a quick shake to make sure that the tape was going to stay in place. As you can tell, An was really concerned that the tape was going to fall off, so he tested it pretty well. And now it was time to begin the hike out. We had been lured into a false sense of security, thinking that the hard part was behind us. As we left the calm of the canyon walls, we got a chance to look up and see the sky. Our perfect blue sky had suddenly been overtaken by dark rain clouds. It appeared that we were going to have to cut our day short and save 𝐈𝐍𝐅𝐻 for another day. With the sky growing more and more ominous, we knew we needed to get to higher ground to avoid the risk of flash floods. Luckily, this canyon has 2 options for exits. It has either a nice walk up a sandy wash, otherwise known as the Slideanide exit, or it has this nasty climb up the canyon wall that you see here, known as the Climber's exit or the Constrictine exit. This route is about half a mile shorter, but it does have some class 4 scrambling involved. We started to feel small raindrops as we clawed our way up towards the top. This route is a serious workout, but the good thing is we were gaining elevation fast and getting away from the wash. As we climbed up onto the ridge, we got a better look around and we could see that there was a big rain cloud coming. We also got a better look at the route that we were going to have to take to get out. We decided that it would probably be a pretty good idea to put our helmets back on because the way out was about to get a whole lot steeper. Right before you reach the top of this section of the exit, there is a small rock climb. This climb is completely exposed, and if you mess up, it is a long ways down. One word of caution, this rock is extremely crumbly and I did have a handhold blow out on me on my way up. As soon as we reached the ridgeline, we were exposed to the full force of the incoming storm. The winds were absolutely ferocious and we could see lightning off in the distance. It was really crazy to see just how fast the weather can change out here, and it's always something to keep in mind when canyoneering. Luckily for us, at this point we are one small rock climb from done with the hard part for the day. From here, it's just pretty much a simple walk back to the car. In the moment, the incoming storm was super scary and sketchy, but now when you look back on it, it sure makes for a good story. And that's gonna do it for our experience at Slideanide. If you enjoyed this adventure, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Check us out on Instagram at thatadventurelife_official. And for all the information about this canyon and other awesome adventures, head on over to thatadventurelife.com.